Any of you looking to retire early are trying to figure out, should I convert my tax deferred assets to Roth? There is no one answer, but I want to do a video today as a follow-up to give you two different categories that you should really consider when it comes to making that Roth conversion decision. Now I'm calling this part 2 because I've already done a video on this that says I have $4 million saved, should I convert it to Roth? Go back and watch that first and then come back and watch this video. So what I want to go over today is there's really another paradigm I want to go over when it comes to Roth conversions. And it's kind of in the same category of the question I get a lot from early retirees, which is, should I pay off my mortgage? The answer to that question is, depends on a myriad of factors. I just want to give you a little bit of more nuanced framework to make this decision. And I want to show you how mostly when you do Roth conversions, especially if you have a long retirement, you're going to realize those benefits later in life. I'm going to give you a case study today when that actually would make sense and maybe you're comfortable with it from a risk management perspective. And then I also want you to understand that this decision really is predicated on you understanding your spending relative to your portfolio value. I'm Forrest Dutton. I'm the owner of Brightworks Financial Planning. I'm a certified financial planner. Love making these educational videos to help early retirees have more knowledge and insight into their strategic retirement plan. This is not meant to be personal, financial, tax, or investment advice. It's just educational in nature. So I hope you enjoy it, and now on to the rest. Okay, so I want to introduce you to this case. And again, just to bring you up to speed, this is part 2. So this is John and Jane Doe. I've changed a few things. So if you'd like to go back and watch the first one, it's a slightly different scenario. So in this case, John and Jane are 56 as of 2026. So they're going to retire early. They have a much longer retirement period. And in this case, their scenario is they both have $2 million in tax deferred accounts. I'll show you that. So they have $4 million total. And they also have a taxable brokerage account that's $500,000. And $125,000 of that is cost basis. So that's the basic inputs here. There's a few more basic inputs. John is the higher earner. He has Social Security that's $36,000 a year. Jane will be $24,000 a year. The other thing is, this is more, again, of a risk management case. So I'm going to argue in this scenario that there's two things that most people discount when they think about Roth conversions. One is going to be, how important are risk management scenarios to you wanting to convert or not wanting to convert, and how much money do you really want to spend relative to your portfolio value? Meaning, do you know you're going to underspend, or do you feel like you could just spend more money? Because in some cases, spending more money can help mitigate some of the problems that you may have later down the road. It just means along the way you're paying the taxes and realizing that that is okay based off your other goals. So I want to explain that to you in this video in detail. So we've modeled a 5% rate of return on their assets. So that would be their tax deferred assets and their brokerage account. What I've also done here is I have put in a spending number. So what they've decided to do, and I'll click into this, is that from age 56 to 67, they're going to live on $80,000. Now they did that for a strategic reason. In 2026, for a couple spending and living on $80,000, in this case their mortgage is paid, they don't have any other car payments or anything, so $80,000 goes pretty far. But it can also help you qualify for ACA premium tax credits, and that's the reason they decided to do that. So what I wanted to model for you here is they're going to radically change their spending when they get to retirement. Now that $160,000 also includes the total that they would need. So it doesn't, that's not just a portfolio withdrawal, that is all they need to live on. So in this case, when they're 67, roughly $90,000 of that will already be covered by Social Security. So they actually won't have to be withdrawing large amounts from their portfolio to meet this need. So that's the scenario. And then the life expectancy for John is set to be 80. So what I've done here is we're modeling a scenario where John actually passes away early. And that's important. The reason that's important is because what can happen here is, and many of you are aware of this, the widow's penalty tax, meaning single tax rates are obviously higher for a set amount of income than they are for married filing jointly. And that's important to them. So I want to make the point here that Roth conversions often are a risk management play. So what I've done here is you can see the trajectory, and I'm just going to hover over this. This is the Roth path. Okay, so this means from 56 to 67 or 66 before they take Social Security, we do Roth conversions. And that keeps us under, in this case, it keeps them under that 24% tax bracket. So they're doing that all in the 22%. The other case, which is a little bit harder to see on its own, but basically there's these light bars next to it. So what you can see is when we get to be 80 and above, 81, we go above that 24 ceiling, and then we even approach the red, which is the 32. So in that case, what we're trying to do here is take that taxable liability now so it doesn't apply in the future. Now I want to show you one thing. This also does include charitable goals. So if someone did not want to give after age 70 and a half, this would be a little bit slightly different. So I do want to be clear about that. I have both clients giving some money throughout retirement. So that means when they're 70 and a half, they're going to give 16,000. And I got that as, that's just 10% of that 16,000 number. So that's client one, that would be John. He can only give until 80 because he's going to pass away early. And then I have 16,000, and then when he passes away, Jane will continue giving but at a lower amount. Now we could always change that, but what that does is that can help mitigate some of that RMD burden. So what I've done there is model what I consider a realistic scenario. And again, I would be very clear here. I want you to see the trajectory of this. So the math in this case shows that there's a $143,000 present value tax difference, right? But that's over a long period of time. So I'm not going to tell you whether that's worth it or not worth it, but one thing I want you to think about is there's really three things in play here. One is risk management, and I don't hear this enough. But in this case, it's not just about the taxes, right? This is about the spouse that's left behind. So if you're looking at this and you're wondering, should I do Roth conversions? One question you want to ask yourself is, do I feel better knowing that my spouse would be in a much better scenario if I were gone early? It's almost like a pension decision or a decision to pay off a mortgage. And I don't hear that enough when I hear people talking about Roth conversions. So the math is the math, right? How much is $143,000 worth to you? I don't know. But how much is it worth to you to do a plan that makes you sleep well at night, knowing that your spouse will not have to sacrifice either lifestyle, travel, giving to family members, next generation wealth goals and legacy? Those are the kind of things that really matter. Or if they needed long-term care, could they continue to pay that because they don't have any tax burden, right? So there could be some other scenarios where this makes a lot of sense for you, but I can't tell you exactly. Again, this isn't personal advice. It's not personal financial advice, but it does help you frame it in that way. So I want you to look beyond the math here, and that's really what I want to show you is, yes, I made sure that the math works here. When they convert, they never go over a certain bracket, and I tried to make that clean. Now in reality, it's a moving target. It doesn't always work like this, and we don't know if life will unfold this way. So that's the projected taxes. There's also, again, there's IRMAA surcharges, so income related monthly adjustment amount, but notice the large amount of that in the base case happens in later years, which we don't really know, again, in this case, if they're going to even live like in those years, right? So in this case, what I want you to realize is just knowing that the large differences here occurred later in life, and we want to know how much does that matter, right? So again, if you feel good knowing in this case when they're 84, there's a huge disparity there, then that's great. But just think about it a little bit more deeper than the math. Is this a risk management play? I think for most people, if they don't have that risk management concern and they realize, well, my spouse is going to be left with a lot of assets, and I'm sure that they will probably live a little bit more simply as a widow, and they will be just fine, and I'm not worried about it, then it takes some of that off the table. It's just one less box you're checking in terms of why you're doing this. Now, the portfolio value is another big reason people do this. But again, there's a break even on this. So remember, you're going to have to take out those tax deferred money, pay the taxes, which is going to, again, after you exhaust your brokerage account, is going to temporarily lower that tax deferred account, right? Because you have to pay the taxes and gross it up from the tax deferred money. But what happens is as tax deferred growth and tax free growth move together, there's a break even point where it actually increases and it becomes more of an exponential growth factor, which again is predicated on life expectancy. So again, if spouse left behind dies 1 year later, then you probably weren't better off doing the Roth conversions in the first place, right? So, and this is showing that in form. The negative is anytime the base case is better. Positive is anytime Roth conversions paid off in terms of the value of the portfolio, right? It just astronomically increases. So there's a value decision to be made here. Now there's one commentator, a financial commentator, I heard him say recently that was very important, is that most of the time the benefits you get from Roth conversions are much later in life. But if you actually think about your planning, and you've probably heard about the go-go, the go, and the no-go, right? So go-go is you're 56, you want to travel, you're retiring early. When you get to be the no-go years, basically that could be, for some people it can be 70s, some people it can be early to mid 80s. It just depends on how long you live and what your health is. But in reality, you're not doing as much. So do you really want to make a decision now that is only going to impact the future you at 80 plus? Only you can answer that question, right? So me as a financial planner, my job is to get those answers out of the client, right? To talk to them and talk to you and say, what really matters? Are we making a decision that is a bird's eye 360-degree view, or are we just looking tunnel vision and saying, I want to pay less taxes? But you got to step back and say why. So in reality, most of the value here falls at the end of life, right? You're doing something in advance that will benefit you later, right? It's almost the opposite of compound interest and savings. So if you save when you're 20, you can use that at 56, right? But if you save at, say you save at 60, you're only going to benefit from that at 80 or 85, right? In reality, that's not when you need the money. That's not when you're doing the most. So just think about that when it comes to Roth conversions. Now, in this case, are you still better off? There could be a case made that you are, but I think there could be a case made that you're not, right? Because you're doing something that is strictly, again, a tax play, which is not wrong, right? But I would say the bigger reason to do this is goal-based, it's values-based, it's, do I want to make sure that if this scenario happens to me, my spouse is taken care of? Now, there could be some slam dunk scenarios where this obviously is going to be better, right? Because if you live on this money early in retirement and you know that your tax rate later, if you don't convert it, will be more. Now, if I took the qualified charitable distributions out of this would even look more favorable. So in conclusion here, I'm not trying to go through every single nitty-gritty detail, but the other thing that I want to bring into play as one final scenario here is that this is a scenario still where someone is underspending, right? So I'm going to show you that. So here's the portfolio value, and it really doesn't matter what number I hover over, right? Let's just say 67. In our plan, they only need to spend $160,000, right? So let's just do the math here, right? Like $4 million at 4% is 160, but we have a lot more than that, right? We have $6 million. So we're not spending as much as we even could relative to our portfolio value. So another way to mitigate this, which again, future RMDs, just spend more between 67 and 75, right? You could do a little of both. You don't have to just only convert or not convert. You could do some years where you convert, some years where you just spend more because you're traveling more, right? So the RMDs, again, there's something to be said for stopping a freight train, right? The train is out of control. It's going to continue to grow and grow and grow until 75, and then you have to take a lot more relative to what you spend. But I think a lot of retirees, especially early retirees, are not looking closely enough at what they actually spend early and how that can affect their portfolio value. Because in reality, if you're open to adjustments of what you spend in retirement, spending more during those early years, and because remember, if you spend the money to do the Roth conversion, you're not spending it on yourself. You're spending it and giving it to your 85-year-old self. So you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Now, for some people it is. For some people it's not. So hope this gives you a little bit of nuance into how these decisions are actually made. The benefit here is, and the purpose here is, everybody's different. This is not meant to be comprehensive personal financial advice. It's meant to give you a framework, because I can't potentially model everything that everybody has going on. So I'd love for you to comment. Let me know what you want to see. I love doing these videos. what scenario would you think would be something that would be interesting to model? So comment, please subscribe. I continue doing these videos so you have more confidence and you're more educated on how to prepare for your retirement planning. And I will see you guys on the next video.